you were an animal. Cause when life looks like easy street, there's danger at your door.
Every day 18. Yesterday you should have watched The Age of Jackson, the Crash Course in American History, 15 minutes or so. I thought that it was a really good kind of a review of everything that's been kind of touched in what we've done so far. Remember, this is about division in the country, and I told you the other day that slavery is going to be the root of this thing, and from this point forward it's not going to go away. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 really starts to put it on this track again of being a regular source of tension, and a regular spark to fires, and you had the nullification crisis, and you have North and South again, not over slavery this time, but over tariffs and what the government's doing and who it's benefiting and who it's hurting. And we go back to the two halves of the country with drastically different needs and only one government, and you can't do both. The other thing that's going to really start to open this wound as far as slavery is concerned, when you get to the 1830s, the abolitionist movement starts to gain traction in this country. Like the political parties organizing, they're going to organize, or they're going to start to attempt to organize. Oddly, very early on in the 1830s, a lot of the original abolitionists were Southerners. Now, that's not going to be acceptable, and they'll be threatened and driven out in a lot of cases. But they're going to start to get together. This thing happens very, very slowly, and there's a reason why I'll get to here in a second. Two things, and they're both on your test. Number one, there's a difference between abolition, abolish, and emancipation. Abolition is the complete end of slavery. Emancipation is the immediate freeing of all Africans from slavery. Early on in the abolitionist movement, abolitionists are in a minority. It really starts with Quakers and religious people more than anything else. The movement will grow as time goes on, and a lot of that will have to do with the shrinking of the country and news moving faster. I mean, for the longest time, the chances if you lived in New York, or if you lived in Ohio per se, the chances of you seeing what is really going on in a cotton plantation in Mississippi or Alabama was pretty rare. And so it's one of those things where it's out of sight, out of mind. You've never really seen it. It doesn't really bother you that much. And so as time goes along, that will change, and as people travel more and see more and information moves faster, more people will get involved. Excuse me, like I said, it's going to take time to get to the point where the numbers of abolitionists are significant enough to really cause change. But in the 1830s, they do start to organize. The biggest stumbling block that most abolitionists have is that they can't agree on, well, they can agree on one thing, and the one thing is that slavery is bad. Once you get past slavery is bad, there's not a consensus on what to do next. And what I mean by that is, some want them freed immediately and given complete rights, like every American citizen. Some people want them freed slowly and sent somewhere like the Indians. Some people think we should free them and send them back to Africa with the idea that they've seen democracy They've seen democracy in action and how great it is, and they can go back to Africa and do these things for themselves. And matter of fact, Liberia, liberty. Liberia is a country that was basically created by the United States in an effort to allow slaves to go back and to practice democracy and capitalism on their own. And funny thing is, the Africans that they send back to Liberia essentially do the same things the Americans do here. They start plantations and start owning other people, and so it doesn't turn out the way that they had hoped. Abraham Lincoln was a big fan for a long time of sending Africans back to Africa. And so there are a lot of people that oppose it, these abolitionists. Their biggest stumbling block is, how, when, where, what, who, and that's really where they'll have their biggest downfall, is they don't necessarily on the same page, and so they all have these different ideas. The only thing, like I said, they can really agree on is slavery is a bad thing. What does it mean? Who should get rights? Should they be treated the same as whites? It's this huge stumbling block, but it exists. It's going to be an agitator, especially for Southerners. It'll keep slavery in the forefront, and like I said, slowly but surely that they're going to start to gain a following. They're going to find lots of ways to further their cause, speaking engagements, which we'll worry about tomorrow. Newspaper articles, pamphlets, poems, books. That they're going to start to expose more and more people to the cruelties and the injustices that slavery is committing. Today we're going to do this relatively quickly. One of the most famous abolitionists in the United States is going to be a guy by the name of William Lloyd Garrison. And William Lloyd Garrison is going to start a newspaper called The Liberator, which, by the way, that's a multiple choice question on your test. I have in your notes, if you go to 12, and I'll shoot it up on the screen like I normally do, I have a Common Core for you. I have to tell you real fast, this is probably, and I say this about a lot of them, this is probably my favorite. But it's pretty deep, and I'm going to help you with the answers. And so I just want to tell you real fast, I'm going to put an assignment up there for you to do. I'm going to give you the answers. All I'm going to ask you to do is retype them, and so it'll be pretty clear who watched this and who didn't. But here we go. If you go to 12, I'll pop it on the screen there for you too. This is an excerpt from one of William Lloyd Garrison's newspapers. It's a primary source document. It's titled William Lloyd Garrison Appeal to David Walker. It's a primary source document, and like I said, he hits this thing out of the freaking ballpark. You ready? We always read the source information first. David Walker, not the guy who wrote this later, a different abolitionist. David Walker was an African American abolitionist famous for his 1829 appeal to the colored citizens of the world. Walker denounced slavery and defended the use of violence as a means to gain freedom. Part of his statement reads, "They want us for their slaves and think nothing of murdering us in order to subject us to that wretched condition. Therefore, if there is an attempt made on us, kill or be killed." Abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison wrote an editorial about Walker's appeal, and it appeared in his magazine, his newspaper, The Liberator. So you have this guy, David Walker, who's also relatively going to be a famous abolitionist, and here we're back to the same problem I talked about a little bit earlier. They can't agree on how this should happen and what should happen and on all these different things. David Walker thinks that slaves should violently rebel to gain their freedom. Now, William Lloyd Garrison is a lot more pious. William Lloyd Garrison hates slavery, doesn't believe it should happen, but William Lloyd Garrison also doesn't think that violence is the answer. And so he's going to write in his newspaper a response to David Walker, and here's his response. And like I said, this thing is kind of deep, but when I pull it apart for you at the end, man, does he hits it a mile. You ready? Believing as we do that men should never do evil and the good may come, we, the people who follow Garrison, disapprove of the spirit and tendency of Mr. Walker's appeal. Nevertheless, it is not for the American people as a nation to denounce it, his response, his letter, as bloody or monsters. Mr. Walker only pays them, the American people, in their own coin. He only follows their, the American people's, own creed. And he only adopts their, the American people's, own language. We, abolitionists, do not preach rebellion. No, but submission and peace. Our enemies, people who want to hang these people who want to end slavery, our enemies may accuse us of striving to stir up the slave to revenge, but their accusations are false. Those accusations, are made only to excite the prejudice of the whites and to destroy the abolitionist influence. We say that the possibility of a bloody insurrection in the South fills us with dismay, and we avow too, as plainly, that if any people were ever justified in throwing off the yoke of their tyrants, the slaves are those people. It is not we, abolitionists, but our guilty countrymen who put the arguments into the mouths and swords into the hands of the slave. Every sentence that they write, Americans, every word that Americans speak, and every resistance that Americans make against foreign oppression is a call upon their slaves to destroy them. Every 4th of July celebration must embitter and inflame the minds of the slaves. And the late dinners and illuminations, the fireworks, and orations, the speeches, and shouting at the South over the downfall of the French tyrant Charles X furnished us so many reasons to the slaves why they should obtain their rights by violence. That's pretty fantastic stuff. Like I said, I promised I'll help you. I gotta find the question sheet real fast. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, it took me a second to find this. Here are your 2 questions. Like I said, I'm going to answer them for you. I'm going to help you. I just want you to do them, fill them in, that way I know you're out there. Question number 1. Choose one single sentence from this passage you feel best sums up its central idea and explain your choice. There are a lot of choices there. There's only one that really makes it. And the one sentence is in the middle of the page. It says, "It is not we, but our guilty countrymen who put the arguments into the mouths and the swords into the hands of the slaves." You know, William Garrison is making an argument here that, you know, people love to blame us. They love to say, you abolitionists, you're causing trouble. You're encouraging our slaves to kill the white people, to like Nat Turner in the middle of the night and axes and fence rails and all that crazy stuff. But he's making a defense of the abolitionists here when he says that. It's not we, it's not abolitionists, it's our guilty countrymen, it's the regular Americans who put arguments into the mouths and swords into the hands of the slaves here in America. It's a great sentence. Now, anytime you make a claim like that, you're going to need to back that claim up. And so the second answer, the answer to the second question clarifies that. It says at the end of the passage, Garrison refers to Americans speaking against foreign oppression and celebrating the 4th of July. how do these comments help him develop the central idea of the passage? Well, it's simple. And this is a test question, by the way, too, so you have to reproduce this for me actually twice. It's simple. To answer it, you have to know one or two things. Number one, you have to know what the 4th of July is. And for goodness gracious, if you don't, just don't say anything to anybody, especially Cannonsburg people with your 17-hour parade and chairs out on the sidewalk 9 months beforehand. The 4th of July is our celebration of independence. And so Americans celebrate every year. They celebrate their freedom. And what are they celebrating their freedom from? They're celebrating their freedom from being slaves. You went back to the unit we did. I asked you, if you have no rights, which the British were taking away, and that's the reason we went to war with them. If you have no rights, what are you? You're a slave. They were British slaves. They had no say, they had no self-government. They were British slaves. And so every 4th of July, the United States celebrates its freedom from slavery, from the British Empire. But that's not the whole thing yet. You have to then understand how that independence was gained. And you gained your independence through blood and violence. You fought a war, you killed people, people on your side died, and through blood and violence, you gained your independence, and you became free of British slavery. And so William Lloyd Garrison's argument, he first says, it's not us, it's not abolitionists. It's not abolitionists who are encouraging slaves to rebel and kill white people. It's everyday Americans. And how are they doing it? Easy. Slaves watch you on the 4th of July. Slaves watch Americans on the 4th of July every year celebrate their independence from slavery with fireworks and speeches and picnics and all these big celebrations. If it's good for you, why is it not good for them? I have this written down here in a simpler term. So here's the answer to number 2. The answer to number 2 is this: Americans encourage the slaves to rebel every 4th of July when they celebrate their freedom from slavery through violence. That's pretty good stuff. I have so much fun with this one in class because when someone figures it out, everyone kind of, it's that aha moment. But that's pretty good. You know, according to William Lloyd Garrison, they don't need us. They don't need abolitionists to encourage them to rebel. They have you, America. And every 4th of July, you show them how great it is. I love it. Hope you liked it. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh yeah, real fast. There will be an assignment for you. All right, see you. Don't you worry anymore. 'Cause when life looks like easy street, there's danger at your door.